Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this webinar today to launch our California Immigrant Data Portal. I am Joanna Lee, Project Manager here at the Equity Research Institute. As you join the webinar, you might have noticed that we asked you to answer a few questions to get to know who was on the call with us. I just want to share the results of this poll before we kick things off. All right, we asked folks where you're tuning in from, and about 59% of you said you're from Southern California, 23% of you said you're from Northern California, 10% from Central California, and 9% outside of California. Welcome. We also asked you what sector you work in, and it looks like 36% of folks are from community-based organizations, 28% are from academic institutions, 14% from government, 7% from philanthropic, and 3% of you are from communications media, and 1% from business, and 11% other. The last question, have you used data from the USC Equity Research before? We see that about 45% said no, 43% said yes. So it looks like we have folks from across the state in many different sectors, and many of you are familiar with our work already. Thank you all for participating and spending the results, and spending this hour and a half with us. I'm going to stop this poll. And just a reminder, today's event hashtag is CA Immigrant Data Portal. If you are on social media during this webinar, please use that hashtag and tag us on @ERI_USC on Twitter and Instagram. Before I dive in, I would like to take a moment to recognize that California is home to Native nations on whose land we are living on, and acknowledge that we here at USC ERI are on Tongva land. We want to challenge the uplifting but inaccurate narrative that the state was built by immigrants. Instead, we want to acknowledge that the land we reside on was taken by a settler colonial society that exploited Native immigrant, migrant, and enslaved people, stealing labor, knowledge, and skills to build what we now call California. As we recognize this history, we must also grapple with what it means to live on stolen land, understand our role and responsibilities as guests on Native American homelands, and be committed to supporting the struggle for Native nation sovereignty and self-determination. If you haven't already, please take a moment today to look up whose land you are on using native-land.ca. Now, I'll turn it over to our director, Manuel Pastor.
Thank you, Joanna, and thank everybody for joining us today. It's, of course, a very, very exciting day for two reasons. One is the launching of the California Immigrant Data Portal. The other is, of course, the 6th game of the World Series. Go Dodgers. Maybe we can end this tonight. So again, my name is Manuel Pastor, and I'm director at USC's Equity Research Institute, which is a little bit like Prince. We were formerly known as something else, the Center for the Study of Immigrant Integration and the Program for Environmental and Regional Equity, or PEER. This is one of the first times that we're hosting an event like this under our new name. So let me just tell you a little bit about the two centers that have kind of merged together. We've been actually operating with the same staff and really pretty much the same mission, but under two different brands. So we're very excited to be one center now, the USC Equity Research Institute. But the goal of our center is very similar to what it has been before, to provide actionable research. In fact, our slogan is data and analysis to power social change, and to equip community-based organizations with the data and analysis that they need in 3 different areas: economic inclusion and climate equity, immigrant integration and racial justice. Clearly today is within that strand, and social movements and governing power. For those of you who are familiar with CSII and what it did, we've built a strong footprint, providing key data estimates, spotlighting researchers, convening key conversations. And while the title CSII is going away, partly because every time I said it, I wanted to say CSII. And while that's going away, ERI will remain just as committed to our community partners, the field of immigrant integration research, and those immigrants who are making the United States their our home. Today is very much in the spirit of the tagline, data and analysis to power social change, because we're going to talk about a new tool we've developed to help bring data and analysis to you, immigrant communities, and those of you doing work with immigrant communities to make sure that their issues come forward. On today's agenda, we're going to introduce you to this new tool, the California Immigrant Data Portal. We're going to share just some of the data indicators featured on the portal, and we're going to discuss the role of data in promoting immigrant integration and immigrant rights with two longtime partners, Marisela Morales, who's Executive Director of Cause in Ventura, and Kathy Cha, who's president of the Evelyn and Walter Harsh Jr. Fund. And I'll talk a little bit about how data has been useful before and how this particular new tool might be useful moving forward. Before Joanna introduces the tool to y'all, I thought I'd explain why we decided to develop a tool like this. This idea of a data portal has been being developed for some time. For the last dozen years, we've always gotten lots of requests about data. And you might think that we developed this just because we're tired of your requests. We weren't tired of your requests. We wanted to figure out how it was we could create a tool that would allow you to answer some of those requests on your own and be able to have actionable data and figures to be able to use in your own work. And one of the things you're going to see that I think is absolutely the coolest thing about this, aside from the fact that you can disaggregate data, aside from the fact that you can answer questions on your own, is that you'll be able to download the data. You'll be able to download JPEGs, which are graphics that you can use in your reports, and you'll be able to actually download a PowerPoint that you can use when you're trying to make a presentation, for example, about the rental burden that immigrant communities face, particularly undocumented immigrants. So your requests have created a demand for us to develop this tool. And in developing this tool, we want to thank our funders in this project, the James Irvine Foundation, the California Endowment, the California Wellness Foundation, the Bank of America, and the Evelyn and Walter Haas Jr. Fund. Our guiding principles for this tool, for this website, and for our immigrant integration work are really the following. The first is that immigrant integration is everyone's business. It's often thought of as something that immigrant rights groups do, or folks working directly in the field of providing immigrant services, but we all benefit when immigrant integration is successful. This has become absolutely clear in the context of this pandemic, something I'll say in a minute. The second big principle is that immigrant integration is not separable from racial justice. If you look at the way that immigrants have been marginalized and othered and left to survive on their own, the only way that's possible is in the context of the deep racism of US society, the racism that led to the genocide of indigenous populations, highlighted by trying to do a land acknowledgement at the beginning, and by the anti-Black racism that consistently made sure that Black Americans don't have a chance to become full citizens, and that kind of marginalization and othering sets the tone for the treatment of immigrants. And the third main principle that guides our work is that California should lead on immigrant integration and provide a model for the rest of the nation. That just as we're leading on climate, just as we're leading on raising the minimum wage, we need to be leading on immigrant integration, and in particular on threading immigrant integration with a racial justice perspective. And while we're presenting this data today, we need to acknowledge that we're in the midst of a worldwide pandemic in which COVID-19 has been something that can affect us all, but it is not an equal opportunity offender. The devastation that's been wrought in indigenous communities, in Black communities, in immigrant communities, and people of color communities has been sharp and has been demonstrated by research. And we know that what we need to do is to highlight these disparities and, of course, really lift up kind of the issues of racism that have been part of ensuring that these disparities take place. And also understand that the impulses that have been the impulses of racist impulses, have been xenophobic impulses, and have been the kind of impulses that make us realize that what's on the agenda on the election next week is not just one party or one president, but whether or not we are going to fully acknowledge the kind of fascist impulses that have been within this country and that have been so appealed to, and whether or not we will take a different turn in which we reclaim our humanity. Of course, we had no idea when we started planning this project that this is where we would be at, that this is where we would be in a moment of the pandemic threatening communities of color, immigrant communities, indigenous communities, Black communities, or that we would be in a moment in which there would be a tremendous awakening around racial injustice and an opportunity to do something about it. But what we did know, even when we started this a long time ago, is that rigorous data and analysis do not solve the problems that we face. We need organizing, we need power building, we need narrative, and we need basic human connections so we see ourselves together as part of a larger and bigger community. But we do know that data and analysis, particularly when it's disaggregated, says to our policymakers, you cannot escape these facts. You cannot escape the way in which COVID is disproportionately affecting certain communities. You cannot escape the fact that we have so many undocumented immigrants striving to do better mixed status communities within California. You cannot escape these facts when you are designing policy. So what we're hoping that this immigrant data portal does is become part of a broader conversation around organizing and power building and narrative and the basic recognition of community, and that it becomes one important tool to be able to move things forward. So now that I've introduced the ERI and our mission to you and provided some context, let me hand it back over to Joanna Lee, who is the lead on the data portal project, and will talk us through some of the cool data tools that are available to you starting today. One important admonition we would ask you, and I'm sure Joanna will repeat this while she's going through it, if you could stay off the website. The more people are on it, the slower it gets, the slower the presentation, the longer it'll take to get to our cool speakers. Joanna, congratulations on this project, and take it away.
Thanks, Manuel. Thank you for all of that. Hello again. My main job today is to take you through the data portal website. And as Manuel just mentioned, we're just asking you to hold off on accessing the website so that we can make sure that we're able to access the site and go through all the features on this demo. So thank you for that. First, I'd like to spend a minute to show you who was behind it all. This is our ERI team on the project. Most of us are actually immigrants or are part of immigrant families. We all hail from different parts of the state as well. Doing this work is personal to our whole team, and we're really proud to be a part of this project. Check out ERI's Instagram page to read more about the team, why we love the work we do, and why this project is so important to us. Thanks, team, for putting so much care into building out this site. I also want to thank the many folks who helped advise us on this website. I know that many of you are joining us today. Thank you to those working in community-based organizations, our affiliate researchers and research partners, foundations, our advisory board, and the many others who took the time to share with us your experience with data and what you would like to see on the site. Your advice and guidance has informed the entire website, especially the case studies and narratives. Now for the site. I'm going to break the site demonstration into 4 parts. First, I'm going to do a brief orientation of the data on our site. Then I'll show you the front page to introduce you to the site. Then next, I will take you through our data summaries feature that can be used to access a set of data indicators across the site for a particular geography. And finally, I will show you the features on our indicator pages, including how to navigate through the charts and other content that we've developed to help build a fuller story beyond the numbers. The California Immigrant Data Portal features data on immigrant communities throughout the state. This site is meant to be a resource and progress tracker for immigrants and those serving immigrant communities. Our site features 18 data indicators organized into 4 categories. The first category, demographics, provides general information on immigrants statewide. The last 3 categories are based on our 3-part definition of immigrant integration. Economic mobility indicators capture the economic realities of immigrants statewide. Warmth of welcome indicators measure the degree to which local communities support immigrants and integrate immigrants into daily life. And civic participation indicators give an outlook on the opportunities that immigrants have to shape civic and political life in their communities. Here, the next slide, is a list of the 18 indicators currently on our site. Data on the site are comparable over time, and you can access data for multiple levels of geography. The portal includes data for all 58 counties, 110 sub-county areas, or for you data nerds, CPUMAs, or consistent public use microdata areas, 33 large California cities, and 1 census designated place, East LA if you're curious. Data for sample size may not be available, due to sample size, data may not be available for all geographies and indicators. For example, some indicators may not have data for sub-county geographies, while others may not have county data, for example. It may have just statewide data. To the extent possible, data are also disaggregated by race, ancestry, and nativity. Most of the data on the site are ERI's analysis of public data sets, such as the US Census's American Community Survey, IPUMS, and summary file data, California Department of Education, California Department of Justice, the Refugee Processing Center, Syracuse University's Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse are some of these data sets. Some of our data are also from vendors such as GuideStar and Political Data Inc. Data on the undocumented and eligible to naturalized populations are estimates that ERI developed based on a statistical model using the 2014 survey of income and program participation that was then applied to ACS microdata. Before we dive into the data tool on the site, though, I'd just like to skip back to highlight the front page. Let's see. Share. All right. When you go to the front page, this is what you will see. Can folks see that? Okay. We've set up the front page to help users understand our approach to this data portal and how our data are organized before diving into the numbers. The rotating yellow headers, the top, have 3 phrases that capture the goals of this site: informing strategy, tracking progress, and connecting communities for a more inclusive and equitable California. The next section explains how we organize our data and our 3 main principles grounding our immigrant integration research that Manuel went over a few minutes ago. Below this, folks can access the main portions of the website using these square images. After this, similar to what I shared at the beginning of the webinar, we use this portion of the site to bring together immigrant and Native and Indigenous communities around a shared analysis with a link to an additional page with more resources we've gathered thanks to Native and Indigenous community leaders and organizations. We also include a special section to discuss the pandemic, the uprisings against police brutality, and the movement to address anti-Blackness. Here we highlight data indicators that might be of particular interest to this current moment. And finally, we include a short case study on the front page to highlight immigrant communities across the state. This study features a report from BAJI, Black Alliance for Just Immigration, uplifting the experiences of Black immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers following a visit to the US-Mexico border with the Partnership for the Advancement of New Americans and Haitian Bridge Alliance. So that's our front page. Now let's head to our data summaries. If we scroll to the top, you will see data summaries at the top right-hand corner of the main menu. You'll click on this to access the page. At the top right-hand corner in the main menu. Okay, this page is a great way to access data for a community. These summaries are available for almost every geography on our portal. You can select your desired geography at the top of the page. Let's check out the data summary for Fresno County, for example. What I'll do here is I'll select my geography type, which is county, and then select Fresno County. All right. This data summary provides the story of immigrants in one area in 8 pre-selected charts. It provides a cross-section of indicators from each of the 4 data categories all in one place. These are the indicators you will see on the data summary page. The data summary is a great tool to begin to learn more about the social and economic dynamics of immigrant communities in your area. in the interest of time, we'll have to move on to the main part of the portal, which are the indicators. Scroll through this real quick so you can see. All right. You can access our indicators in several ways. There's a square card on the front page that brings you to the indicators landing page, or you can simply head to the menu at the top and click main page and click on the page. You can also hover over the word indicators if you want to go straight to a specific indicator. This box will pop up and you can scroll to the indicator you'd like to select. Let's head. Okay, so now we're at the indicators page. This indicators page is where users can access all of our 18 indicators on one page organized in 4 sections: demographics, economic mobility, warmth of welcome, and civic participation. We won't have time to discuss all of the indicators today, but I will walk you through a few you may be interested in to show you some of the various functions of the portal. First, I'll go through one of our economic mobility indicators, housing burden. Let's scroll back up here. Click on housing burden. There we go. We know that the high cost of housing statewide is a main concern for all communities, and housing cost burden is a major barrier to being able to save money and build wealth. So what does it look like for immigrant communities across the state? I'm going to use California as an example, but I do want to point out that at the top of the chart, you can select a geography. You just select type, for example, a county or city, and then select a specific place you would like to look at. Okay, so the first thing you'll notice is the main graphic display. For example, this chart shows housing burden by tenure and severity between 2000 and 2018. There are filter options located over the chart, which you can select to look at specific displays of the data. And in this case, the options are tenure and severity. If you have further questions about what the indicator or chart means, you can hover over this question mark and click, which provides a definition of the indicator and links to the methodology and data sources page. Below the graphic, we offer framing and examples that policymakers and advocates might need to be able to share this data and incorporate it into your work. Here we have a high-level analysis of the data located in the what it shows and why it matters sections. Moving down further, we include insights and analysis. These are key insights we've gathered from looking at all the geographies for this indicator. For some indicators, we've added additional data for more context, or to include communities and issues that may not be fully represented in the data above. On each indicator page, there are 1 to 2 narrative pieces in these yellow boxes that provide specific examples of what immigrant integration looks like. We include examples of how immigrant advocates and service providers are responding to the needs in the community, reports and campaigns that shed light on different issues facing immigrants, and stories of immigrant leaders serving their communities. A few of the indicator pages like this one have links to organizations, other reports, and articles to provide more information on the indicator topic. All right, returning back up to the graphic display, let's take a closer look at the indicator interface. All right, another cool feature that Manuel already spoke about is the ability to download data, PowerPoint presentations and graphics for your own work. Simply click on the download link here, and you can select one of the 3 types of formats to download: JPEG, PowerPoint, and Excel. All right, for the sake of time, I've actually already preloaded the PowerPoint for by status, and you can see it here, the slide deck here. It's a pretty cool feature. Let's take you back to the site here. Also, just to note, there's a button next to this download feature that allows you to share this indicator on social media or email. And the icon next to that, this one allows you to view the page in full screen mode. Most indicators have multiple options for visually breaking down the data in the breakdown section here. You just click on the section to expand the view. The first breakdown is the one that is already up for us, which is our trend chart. Here we are looking at renter households who spend more than 30% of their income on housing costs, or those who we say are burdened. So here we see that since 2000, housing burden has gotten worse for everyone, but the gap between immigrant and US-born households has grown slightly over the past 2 decades. In 2008, 59% of immigrant households were housing burdened. Renter households were housing burdened compared to 53% of US-born renter households. Now let's look at our by status breakdown. You'll see here that there are 3 filter options. I've selected the default here, which is renters who are burdened at all income levels. You will see here that we have data for immigrants as a whole, as well as immigrants who are undocumented, lawful permanent residents, and naturalized US citizens. In this breakdown, you can see that undocumented immigrant renter households are more likely to be housing cost burdened compared to US-born and all other immigrant groups by status in California. Our next breakdown is by race. Data are disaggregated by 7 racial groups and by nativity. And here you can also filter the chart to drill down and look specifically at housing burden by race by tenure, severity, poverty, and year. Next, we have a breakdown by ancestry, which provides further detail about the amount of housing burden facing specific communities. We have data available for about 50 ancestry groups, and here you can see that Syrian, Armenian, Egyptian, Jamaican, Guatemalan, Argentinian, and Vietnamese renter households are the most housing cost burdened. Yes, the chart is small. There's a lot of data in this chart, so I'll take a moment to remind folks that you can download the data in the Excel table using the small arrow button next to the filter options. Finally, last up on this indicator is the ranking breakdown. This shows you how places you're looking at rank among all other places in that geography. So for example, I will look at how counties compare when it comes to housing burden. I'll select San Diego as an example. We can see here that among all counties, San Diego County ranks 8th with 61% of all immigrant renters burdened by the high cost of housing. You'll notice here that we only have 31 counties ranked for this particular indicator. In some cases, geographies are excluded when the sample size for immigrants by these cuts are too small. And note here that you can use the filter options at the top to change the housing burden ranking based on tenure, severity of burden, and immigration status. Speaking of comparing across geographies, we also have another feature at the top of the chart where you can also compare 2 geographies for the same indicator breakdown. I'm going to go back to show you this. The Select Compare feature is where you compare data for 2 geographies. So you'll select the first geography, which here we have already selected San Diego County, and then you'll click Compare, and you'll select the second geography. We will select its neighbor, Orange County. The orange bars here represent data for San Diego, and the gray bars represent Orange County. I would also like to take you through one more indicator if we have time. Let's go to immigration status. All right, we're going to head to immigration status. The first breakdown here shows immigrants by status and race. We have total, here, let me close this button right here. Thank you. So we have total immigrants as well as undocumented, lawful permanent residents, and naturalized US citizens for each bar, color-coded by racial group. The second breakdown shows immigrants by race, broken down by status. For example, we see here about 11% of Black immigrants in California are undocumented. The third breakdown shows immigrants by ancestry. You can select ancestry by race. We'll select Asian or Pacific Islander, then filter by status. We'll select undocumented here. Here you will see disaggregated data for nearly 11 subgroups, and you can see large numbers, for example, of undocumented immigrants who are Indian, Filipino, Chinese, Korean. But also you can see numbers for Pakistani, Vietnamese, Cambodian, and many other subgroups. The last breakdown shows immigrants by status and age group. Here you can see that the immigrant population tends to be younger, and that, for example, those who are undocumented tend to be of working age or younger. Below here, the insights and analyses below the chart provide even more data as we include numbers of those who are DACA recipients and estimates of those who hold temporary protected status or live with someone who has TPS status. We also include data on LGBT immigrants courtesy of the UCLA Williams Institute and the number of international students. And here we feature one of our local community leaders here in LA, Paul Sock, who shares his own story, which informs his work on immigration issues. I hope this demonstration provides a good sense of the data and content we have on the data portal. Our team will be implementing some exciting updates for the website in the coming months and years. Some of the new features and activities planned for the website are a map feature for many of our indicators, integrating new indicators, and for example, we will be adding languages spoken, and doing special webinars highlighting specific indicators on the site. I would encourage you to join our email list so that we can let you know when we add new features and host events related to the data portal. There is an orange pop-up box on the bottom right side of the website where you can sign up to get updates. So I'm out of time for this demo, but I encourage you to put on your data nerd hat and check out the site on your own. There are 18 indicators to gather data from, as well as a lot of additional content that I hope you'll spend some time diving into. Now I'll turn it back over to Manuel.
Thank you, Joanna. I feel like I wish I could mute all 200 of our participants so we could do a big round of applause to Joanna and the team for this really extraordinary tool. And I also wanted to lift up one person who wasn't listed on our team before, but certainly as a part of it, Emma Yudilovich, who has been providing administrative assistance in particular on this project, and is the reason why this Zoominar today has not completely fallen apart yet. It's because of her very apt skills of keeping us all together and moving forward. The other thing I wanted to mention as we move to our panelists and also do a little bit of Q&A is one question that did come up, might make sense to really clarify right now, is what do we mean when we say immigrant integration? And I really want to go back to a definition that we've been using, is that immigrant integration is economic mobility for civic participation by and receiving society openness to immigrants. Economic mobility for civic participation by receiving society openness to immigrants. We like that kind of a definition for three reasons. One, it's mutual. It really understands that integration is a two-way affair. It's about receiving society openness and the fact that societies will change as a result of new people coming and bringing their the wealth of their contributions culturally and otherwise. The second thing we like about that sort of definition is that it's measurable, meaning that for each one of those things, economic mobility, civic participation, and receiving society openness, you can actually measure that. That's a lot of what the California Immigrant Data Portal is about. And third is that it's multicultural, meaning that when we say immigrant integration, we do not mean an assimilationist view of people somehow disappearing into the American mainstream, quote unquote. In fact, we think that what we're talking about is far more of a mosaic, but actually also that it has to be forged in the context of a struggle against racism, and in particular, anti-Black racism. That is, that immigrant integration is not about newcomers hopscotching over previously oppressed groups. It's about forming alliances, forming coalitions, and lifting all of us up into a more just, sustainable, and robust society. So I just really want to clarify that when we're talking about immigrant integration, it's perhaps not what some people say, but that it really is the kind of definition that I just offered. We want to shift now to hearing a little bit from two of our longtime partners in the work, who will talk a little bit about the way in which they've used data in the past and the way in which they've used our data in particular. First up is Marisela Morales. Marisela is the executive director of CAUSE, and she's probably kind of a poster child for progression as well, because She started as a volunteer with the Ventura County Living Wage Coalition, part of CAUSE. She came on as staff in 2001, the year that CAUSE actually formally began, and helped to obtain the organization's 501c3 status. Since 2001, she's worked on a variety of issues from the living wage, health coverage, women's economic justice, the green economy and environmental justice, and local hire projects. Grateful to her Mexican immigrant parents, as I am grateful to my immigrant parents. Maricela was raised in Ventura County, attended Fillmore Public Schools, earned a BA in human biology at Stanford University, and an MA in counseling psychology from Pacifica Graduate Institute. She has worked with the community to become the first Latina elected to the Port Winnemi City Council in 2002, and in 2007 became the city's first Latina mayor. Gracias, Maricela, por estar con nosotros hoy. We also have with us Kathy Cha. Kathy Cha is the president of the Evelyn and Walter Haas Jr. Fund. Under her leadership, they're exploring innovative approaches to advancing the struggle against inequality and promoting justice so every person has the opportunity to thrive and to live life with dignity and hope. Her work is driven by a career-long commitment to improving the lives of aspiring communities facing discrimination and poverty, and her collaboration-focused approach with funders, movements, nonprofits, and government has helped spark wide-ranging social impact, including California's rise to the top among states in advancing pro-immigrant policies. I could say a little bit more because the Haas Fund is not just advancing immigrant rights, but LGBT equality, promoting a fair and representative democracy, really embodying the spirit that I said, which is it's not about groups hopscotching over one another into the middle class. It's about changing the terrain so every group and every person has the opportunity to thrive. But my favorite thing I've got to say about Kathy is she's been willing to make wild bets. She's been willing to invest in Black immigrant organizing before many people wanted to. She's been willing to make bets in weaving together LGBT communities and immigrant communities before others were doing it. So she's been a real visionary who's bet on the things we need to make change. So thrilled to have both of you with us, and each of you has about 8 minutes to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your organization, what data means to you. If you're me, you'll say data means everything. What data means to you, and at least one example of how you've been using data, hopefully our data, in the past to support your own work. So Maricela, we'll go to you first.
Thank you. Gracias, Manuel. Thank you to USC Equity Research Institute, and congratulations on your rebirth under this name, for all of your work, for the team that's worked so hard on this California Immigrant Data Portal. Bienvenidos, welcome to everybody. Over 200 people have joined us today, and so well worth it and important, because this information is about changing lives. It's about changing our communities, our state, to one that is about welcoming and integrating immigrants. CAUSE is rooted on California's Central Coast, Ventura and Santa Barbara counties. We've been here since 2001. It's a 100-mile region that we cover over those two counties, and we are committed at the core to grassroots power building from the bottom up, and specifically working and organizing base building with working class, Latinx, and immigrant communities that are an overwhelming part of our communities here on the Central Coast. We organize with youth, high school age. We organize with young adults in their 20s, millennials, and we organize with immigrant adults. And we do that across 6, what we see as intersectional areas. So immigrant rights, housing, whether that be affordable housing, supporting that, or tenant rights, environmental justice, voting rights and redistricting, low-wage working workers, particularly over the last 5 years, focusing on farm workers, and investing in youth of color and what their issue priorities are, which have consistently been around mental health. So that's a little bit about our work. In terms of what this site has meant to us in its previous iteration, and even more so and powerful from the little glimpses that we've seen today, so excited to jump in to that ocean of data. But we've turned to USC ERI for data on immigrants. And I'll give you some specific examples. So post-pandemic, rising unemployment, the need to provide a safety net where the government has not provided one for undocumented immigrant workers who have been the hardest hit by job loss by the pandemic. And so, the governor announced he was pitching in some millions of dollars. Philanthropy stepped up and matched the state. But where is that money going that is specific to undocumented immigrants? We know California as a whole has many undocumented immigrants, but it's a large geography. It's the biggest state in the union. So where do those investments, where should they be targeted? And we turned to USC ERI and we learned that the county, the 2-county area that has the highest proportion of undocumented immigrants is actually Monterey San Benito County. That's the northern section of the Central Coast 6-county region. We did not know that before. And in the vastness of California, Monterey County doesn't, is not typically the focus of what we're talking about, the geographies. And so that data that Monterey San Benito County twice the statewide average, 6% undocumented statewide, but Monterey San Benito County at 12.5%. Well, that is critical information in terms of where these dollars needed to go. And so we share that information not only with our partners and allies in those counties, but also with funders who wanted and were making available funds specifically for undocumented workers impacted by the pandemic, unemployed, and who are shut out of the state unemployment system because of their immigration status. Another example is where we're looking at LPR, legal permanent residence. So one of our partners locally wanted to do citizenship fairs, workshops. And they mentioned Simi Valley. So that's a community in the shadow of the Reagan Library, home to where the Rodney King trials happened. We don't work in that area specifically in Ventura County. And so when they said at first, well, we want to do these workshops in Simi Valley, initially, our thought was, I don't know if that's where you should be, investing your efforts. But we looked at the data, again, that USC, the team here's work, and actually found that Simi Valley was in the top 3 of high concentration of LPRs in our area. And had we not had that data, we may actually have discouraged our partners from doing anything in that community, specifically around citizenship workshops. So again, data matters. Data, they say data raises eyebrows, but stories, elevate our consciousness. And so the power of what USC ERI has done with the California Immigrant Portal is that it's about the data and it's about stories. It's about the holistic picture. So yes, the data matters and the stories that go along with it. Lastly, I want to close with what's coming. 2021, the decennial redistricting effort. This portal is going to be so critical. I certainly hope that the new California Redistricting Commission utilizes this portal. We will be utilizing it for all the city, state, congressional district maps that we are going to be working in our community. But Joaquin Avila, who was the architect of the California Civil Rights Act around voting rights in 2001, he wrote about political apartheid when it came to representation, and that political apartheid exists when over 25% of your voting age population is ineligible to vote. Well, that's a large part of the immigrant community. And so with this portal, we can look at where are the LPRs, where are the undocumented, because we need to lift up that data to make sure that in this decennial redistricting effort, they are fairly represented. So we're looking forward to 2021 and being able to use this portal to inform our redistricting maps. Thank you.
So thank you. Maricela, when the data and the leadership of the advocates come together, that's when change happens. And Maricela, you've given us great examples to show how we can move forward. So like you and like Manuel, I'm so grateful to my immigrant parents as well, who came here from a rice farm in South Korea with incredible courage and big dreams. And at Haas Jr., we are all about big dreams, advancing equality and justice so every person can thrive, live life with dignity and hope. And we have been working alongside and supporting immigrant communities and advocates in the state for over 15 years, and leaders like Maricela and many others around the state. And I want to thank everybody for having me here today. I got a chance to click around on the preview site, and wow, you know, let me just say, this ain't your mama's data portal. Beautiful graphics, photos, it's easy to read. You can download a chart into a presentation. There are case studies and vignettes about community groups around the state. It's like Twitter. You could lose hours there just clicking around. And I just want to appreciate the team at USC and ERI that built this. It's really, really amazing. And so let me just add a little bit to what Maricela said. Why is the data portal so important? And, you know, 1 week out from Election Day, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the misinformation about immigrants that has come from the president on down. And we need to battle back and have facts matter again. And ERI is helping us get back to a place where data and truth matter again. And that's super, super important at the highest level. In terms of California and the immigrant rights movement here, I've had the tremendous honor to have had a front row seat watching and supporting and funding California's immigrant movement to get stronger over the past decade. And now, because of the strength of that movement, we can proudly say that our home state is the most welcoming in the country. We know our state is stronger because immigrants contribute to our economy and to our neighborhoods in powerful, powerful ways. And I just want to tell you that data and research, exactly like the new portal offers, helped us get here. And we still have work to do. So data and research, exactly like the new portal offers, will help us get further down the road of progress. I want to give you a couple of examples where I've personally been involved with the USC team working on data and community change. So back in 2011, ERI helped us better understand Black communities in the state. And until their data analysis came out, we didn't know that there were so many African immigrants in California, and that those communities were really growing in numbers in pretty surprising big ways. We thought more of the African immigrants were on the East Coast in New York or other parts of the country. And it turns out here in California, we have a lot of Somalis, Nigerians, Ethiopians, Eritreans. and others that hail from different parts of the Caribbean and from Africa. And disaggregated data really helped us see that Black Californians are not a monolithic population. And I want us to think about that for a second and think about how accurate disaggregated data can help you as a local government trying to design and deliver services, as an immigrant organizing group, who to organize, how to get out the vote for the election, and as a funder wanting to support immigrant integration. In all of those cases, accurate disaggregated data is super important. And in this project, the bottom line was we needed to better understand Black communities in a nuanced way in order to lift them up and build their strength. And ERI helped us do that. They looked at the movement of immigrants and African Americans and the potential to organize around common goals. And then two Black advocacy groups, Priority Africa Network and BAJI, the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, started focusing on and advocating for the specific needs of many different Black immigrants. But the data was the starting point. It all starts with the data, right? You gotta make your case. And I'll just lift up two more quick examples. We also, like Maricela, have been part of citizenship initiatives where we're trying to help legal permit residents become citizens so that they can vote and experience the full benefits of citizenship. ERI really helped us figure out the number of legal permanent residents in each counties of the state so that we could target our efforts and really tailor them to the particular types of immigrants in those counties. And my last quick example, ERI found that half of California's undocumented immigrants have been living here for 10 years or longer. And that data really showed that undocumented immigrants are rooted. They're our neighbors, they're already our coworkers, their kids are on their soccer teams with our kids. And understanding that and lifting up that data point has been really, really important as we seek inclusion, acceptance, and full integration of immigrant communities. So those are just a few examples where USC's data has helped the movement in powerful, powerful ways. And I have many more examples. And what is cool is that because of the data portal, you have all of that data at your fingertips now. So one last quick thing, I just wanna thank all the advocates and the immigrant communities that are here today. You know, I know with the pandemic, the stresses of this administration, the hate that is everywhere right now, it feels like we are in the fight of our lifetime. And I just want to say thank you for all the work you're doing. I want you to stay strong and know that justice will win and that we will win. So thank you, and back to you, Manuel.
Thank you, Maricela and Kathy. That provoked a lot, and I'm going to ask Joanna, you can unmute your video and your voice and come back on, and we'll talk about a few questions. I wanted to lift up a couple things from stuff you said and then move to a few questions. Maricela, I've never really heard that story about Simi Valley. But one of the things I think is really important, and we would urge you to go to look at this data, is that a lot of times we have in our minds old mental stories about who immigrants are, that not many Black people are immigrants. Well, it's about 10% of Black people in California are immigrants. Another about 9% or so are the second generation kids of those immigrants. That's a huge share of the Black California population. Or for example, when you think about it and the fact that people got pushed out through high housing prices to the Simi Valley, then you say, oh yeah, that makes sense. But another thing, just even for Kathy, the number now is that 2/3 of undocumented immigrants have been in the country for a decade or longer. And the reason why is because the undocumented population actually peaked in the United States in 2007. It's been on the decline since. Net migration from Mexico, largest sender, is negative. And so that population is getting much more settled over time. And we'd actually double and triple check this to make sure that if you kind of think about changes over time, this is consistent. Yes, it is. So one of the things we would urge you to take a look at with the data is that not all of what even we who are really well versed in this have in our heads is always accurate, because that's a situation that's changing over time. Last thing I'll say, and then I'll steer a question to Joanna, is that we also thank the advocates and organizers and civic and community leaders, not only for your work, but for your questions. Because unless you were asking us about this data and suggesting these particular cuts, we never would have gotten to this immigrant data portal. We can do the bells and whistles, but we don't really know what will make the eyebrows raise, as Maricela talked about, and it is your wisdom from the organizing that has really driven the conception and the questions that are being answered and the stories that are being told in this site. Joanna, one of the questions that came up, I'll steer to you, is one is about, will the recording be available? And two, what are our plans on updating in the future?
Yes, so there will be a recording available later on for you to share with folks or revisit, especially as you go through the site and want to maybe refresh your memory on all the different tools and tips available on the indicator page. So that's the first one. The question is, will we be updating the data? Is that right, Manuel? And yes, we will be continuing updating the data on the site, refreshing it as we get new data for other years, for consecutive years, and also adding new indicators and the map feature, as I said before. So keep in order to keep up to date with the data portal, I just recommend going to the website and then clicking on the orange box and filling in your information so you can get updates, so you can know when we update the website.
There'll be surprise for you nearly every day. It'll be so exciting.
We have a lot planned.
Probably not every day. This team has been working so hard, and I know that they were actually working all over the weekend to make sure that everything that got up on the web today was actually robust and wouldn't, like the first month of Obamacare, wind up getting broken and discouraging you. Maricela, you talked a little bit about redistricting and the way that you would think that it'd be useful to bring this kind of data into redistricting. Can you say maybe a little bit more about that, particularly with regard to the data, but also just the importance of redistricting and some of the community and civic organizing that's going on around that?
Absolutely. So 10 years ago, we had our first public commission process for redistricting, and we think it went well. This time around, it's a whole new process. But one of the key things in redistricting is communities of interest. And there are many ways to describe communities of interest geographically, in terms of race and ethnicity, age, housing, transportation. There's all sorts of ways. Well, certainly in terms of immigration, or being an immigrant, as well as the immigration, status. And so we'll be using this information. We think it's relevant absolutely for the whole state, because with this data, it'll be the first time that you can actually delve into county, sub-county, cities and look at, well, immigrants, just like any other population, is not a monolith. So, in this city, in this county, are we talking about, LPRs? Are we talking about, to what extent are they undocumented? And then on the race and ethnicity, looking at a community, right? And it's like, well, in this city, it is mostly African, and in this neighboring city, it is or it isn't the same race and ethnicity, and all that is going to play into, how those lines are drawn. Where do those communities of interest in terms of immigration or immigrants, where do those boundaries extend to? And so I think it's incredibly important information to take into account in drawing what will be, the lines for representation for the next 10 years.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and answer one question and steer another one to Kathy. I'm going to try to be alternating kind of technical nerd questions for Joanna and me, with more broad political and, in a sense, questions too for you all. And one, which is actually kind of an interesting question, is while we've got a lot of the data trends over time, we don't have it on undocumented. So I wanted to explain why. For those other, and it raises an interesting possibility, which is, but the following, for those other characteristics, those are characteristics collected by the census, whereas undocumented is an estimate we make for the non-citizen population. And the way that we calibrated it is off a 2014 survey of income program participation, where we could figure out who was documented and not documented, and then apply those characteristics to estimate who in the ACS, American Community Survey, was undocumented. The reason why that's important and why this is totally cool is because the undocumented population has changed quite a bit since the early 2000s. It's much more long-lived. It's much less Mexican because it's become much more diverse in terms of people coming from other countries. It's much more visa overstayers. The thought now is that probably half, or at least more than half of the new undocumented are visa overstayers rather than border crossers. And so in order to get a really good estimate, we were using the most recent data. You can't really use that estimate on earlier data because the characteristics of that population were different. We did do early estimates, and one thing we might explore in the future is whether or not we could use some of those early estimates to backtrack. It wouldn't be quite the same, but it might give you kind of an idea of the change over time in a place like Monterey, San Benito County, as Maricela was mentioning. Kathy, I'm wondering if you might say a word. I talked a little bit about why we've woven together immigrant integration and racial justice, and tried not to see immigrant integration as separate from the struggle against anti-Black racism. Talked a little bit about how we've done that, and perhaps haven't said as much about where we've needed to push a little bit in the academy around that, because not that many immigrant integration centers really maybe include as much on that as perhaps they should. You've tried to do that in the philanthropic world as well. Can you talk a little bit about why it's important to you, why you think it's critical for all of us to be weaving these two things together, and the work of Haas in that arena?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think perhaps one of the points of silver lining of the last 4 years of this Trump administration is all of our country's racist roots have been laid bare. And like you said, Manuel, we can't ignore the facts anymore. The truth is there, and the disproportionate impacts are across the board. And for us, I think we have come to a pretty powerful realization at the Haas Junior Fund, partly because of our deep work in LGBTQ communities, that we are all fighting the same hate. And the quicker we realize that, as Maricela, an immigrant from Mexico, and me, kid of an immigrant from Korea, alongside transgendered and African American, Black immigrant, etc. And I could keep going and keep going. We're being othered very much the same way. And I think the other powerful thing about data is you can see similarities. We've been talking about disaggregation as, oftentimes different, nuances and difference, this town versus that town, this neighborhood, but similarities in home ownership rate, similarities in unemployment, similarities in COVID exposure. There are a lot of ways where we can see we have common ground to build on, and data can help us see the possibilities of connecting and bridging in new powerful ways as well.
Joanna, this is a question I'm going to modify kind of to you. It's a great question about, do we collect other hard to reach vulnerable populations, victims of human trafficking, gender-based violence, etc. And one way I've thought about this website is it allows not the easy questions, but like a range of questions that people used to ask us to be addressed. So, for example, Maricela, you asked us about undocumented in Monterey County. You can get that right now on your own, right? By just going to this website. So, Joanna, this does not mean an end to custom requests. Can you talk about maybe one or two custom requests that have come our way and things we've tried to do to meet those needs?
Well, I think that there are a lot of additional resources on our site beyond the data chart. So if you scroll down to the insights and analyses, oftentimes that's where we'll put reports and resources, links to other data that we weren't able to incorporate into the data chart, but wanted to highlight anyway. So, and there's also resources like links to other reports. So I think we had a long list of indicators and data that we wanted to pull, and there are obviously limitations to what you can find in terms of some of the cross-cutting demographic characteristics, but we're continuing to explore and figure out ways to incorporate more data. So I think that's been, you know, one of the ways we're going to be continuing to update the website. So that's what, yeah. But we are open to folks approaching us about data requests. If you have specific cuts that you're looking at specifically that aren't featured on the website, please feel free to reach out to us and we can see what we can do.
Yes, and I would raise, for example, you know, when we did the project with Baji, when we defined Black, we made sure that include anybody who also considered themselves multiracial. It's probably a proper way to define Native and Indigenous folks too, because of so many people of mixed ethnicity. There's a couple of technical questions here. We don't have currently data that's relevant to ITIN. One thing I would say, both the individual taxpayer identification number that a lot of unauthorized immigrants use in order to file taxes. Pretty important with regard to, for example, the Cal EITC earned income tax credit that's now being extended to Californians, regardless of status. The Public Policy Institute of California does rely on ITINs to do their estimates of undocumented, and they are pretty close to what we have. There's also a question about undocumented students enrolled in higher ed. I don't think that's currently on our website, but that would be an interesting thing for us to bring in. And I do think that we're going to be trying to continue to solicit ideas and to try to add new data as appropriate, and then also do custom runs as people need them. And Joanna, maybe you could say, have you had a, I don't know if you've had a chance to think ahead to whether or not there will be webinars in the future to allow deep dives on particular issues. I know this is terrible when the director of the Research Institute says, well, this was great, what's next? But hey, this was great, what's next?
Well, I mean, we have some indicators that we have in the wings waiting to get put up on the site that we're waiting. We do want to look at cuts, for example, by gender. We're interested in just fleshing out some of the indicators a little bit more. And of course, that map feature. So folks will be able to look at the data in a map and be able to hone in on your particular area. So we're looking forward to that. We also, again, yeah, like you said, Manuel, we do want folks to approach us if you have ideas for data indicators, and we can add them to our list to try to explore. So that would be really helpful as well.
I'm gonna start to bring us to a close because I think we've addressed most of the questions, and I know people feel incredibly liberated when Zoom things end earlier than you anticipated and you can get a cup of tea or coffee. But I wanted to say just a couple things and then see whether Maricela, Kathy, and Joanna want to say one last word and then I'll close. Which is that we are aware, I love that expression, Maricela, data raises eyebrows. And it also provides background, legitimacy, credibility, and believe me, we've worked hard to make sure that all these numbers are accurate. We also know that data only moves people with a story. And so one of the things I hope you'll notice when you look at this website is there's a story on every page, a story of community organizations trying to make change, a story of really cool policies that could be put in place, and an idea of how to interpret the data. Because, for example, you could interpret the fact that that undocumented Californians are long-lived in California as, damn it, our system's not working, why are they still here? Or to understand that they've really sank their roots in. And we want to make sure that you get the second interpretation and not the first. So we try to make sure that this data is always told with a story, and we think that data producers need to be very responsible about the story that surrounds the data as well. And then finally, we're very conscious of our slogan, data and analysis to power social change. And by that, what we mean is, one of our internal slogans is, we don't change the world, we work with people who change the world. We know only if this data gets in the hands of movement organizations and change makers will it actually lead to change. So we are the tail and we are not wagging the dog of community power, but the ways that we can be supportive are incredibly important. Let me ask each of the folks on the panel right now to say a final word. Marisela?
So again, thank you, gracias to everybody that joined all of us here today. And closing with the power that this statewide, both very localized and statewide data can be both about having the power of specificity and the particularity. Those details matter in telling the stories we need to tell for the sake of justice and protecting people's lives literally and advancing their prosperity. But also to the point that Kathy brought up, that it's also about how it strengthens us to come together in ways that we hadn't thought about. And so I think about how, in looking at, if we go beyond wherever locale that we happen to be working on, to take the time to look at other locales and perhaps find that there are connections and similarities based on our immigrant populations in places that we had never thought about. And so then hence the potential for this to also be weaving a stronger tapestry throughout the state in terms of our relations and connectivity around our immigrant communities.
Let me just jump in and say, a lot of the consternation and the anxiety around the country is from less diverse states that see our demographic destiny and it scares them. And I think we have so much to show as a state. And the big thing we can show is that it's a hopeful, happy ending. My neighborhood is so diverse, and we wouldn't have it any other way, because the environment that I raise my children in, it's better for them. It's making us stronger. And the beautiful picture of data that we can present to the rest of the country. California is this diverse, and we have people that hail from all over the world, and we speak this many languages, etc. It's a beautiful, happy ending. And I think we should be proud of that. And I appreciate that you all are painting that picture at ERI. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy, for what you said. I am extremely proud of this project, and I'm extremely proud to be working at a center that is really dedicated to working with the movement and working and being so closely connected to community work. And I really am hopeful that this data portal can be used for more of that work. And I'm really pleased and happy. Just one thing about this data is it's really personal to me. I mean, I am I'm a child of immigrant parents from Hong Kong. And I see my family in this data, and I see, my family, my friends in this data. And so I'm really hopeful in the future of the state, and I'm really hopeful in that everybody can use this data to build a more powerful movement.
Thank you, Joanna. And I guess I'll just add to that. This means a lot to me too, as I think many of you know, my father was undocumented until I'm old and he was older, obviously, until World War II, when he was given a choice between being deported or joining the US Army. And that was his path to legalization and citizenship. And in preparing for this, I wound up digging up his citizenship papers from 1944, just as he was being shipped to Europe to risk his life for this country, but having to transform into a citizen from lacking status. And of course, that move, as well as the work of unions to create living wages for his generation, the work of civil rights leaders to open up doors to African Americans and Latinos, both in housing and in education, the commitment of the state to investing in what we needed in terms of a master plan for people to be able to succeed. We need to remember those stories and lift up those stories and put a better future ahead for all of us by honoring those who came before us and honoring those who are coming to us now with the contributions and beauty and richness that they bring. So we want to really thank you for being with us today. Really an amazing achievement on the part of Joanna and the rest of the ERI team who put this together. Thank you to Kathy and Maricela for participating. And I'll just close with one word: vote. Thank you.